yesterday's news.
Hello and welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news stories of the day through the press of yesterday. Well, the Pulrose power station has been back in the news fairly recently following noise issues. I used to live close by to it, so I can tell you a little bit about those. And it made me think about how often has the power station and electricity featured in the news? Quite a bit over the years. And some interesting little snippets here and there as well. The Times, Isle of Man Times, Saturday, December the 13th, 1947. Manx electricity extensions. Pulrose power stations on full load, we're told. Extensions to prevent load shedding to cost £300,000. A lot of money in 1947. Conversion from DC to AC is vital. You forget about that, don't you? It used to be DC. The statement that Pulrose Power Station is giving double the output of 1939 with the same plant, and the load is still increasing, was made by Councillor T. Radcliffe, chairman of the Corporation Electricity Committee, at a press conference on Monday, when, with Mr. Anderson, Borough Electrical Engineer, he gave a preview of the proposed extension to the Pulrose Power Station to cost around £300,000. Councillor Radcliffe said the present position was causing grave anxiety, and unless a new 5,000 kilowatt generator was installed, the demands of the future could not be met. The conversion of 75% of Douglas from DC to AC over a period of 9 years at a cost of £350,400 is also proposed. The changeover was stated to be vital, as domestic and commercial DC apparatus will become unobtainable following the Central Electricity Board's decision to standardise AC throughout the United Kingdom. You do forget about that now, don't you? The changeover from DC to AC current, which would now be complete but for the war, we are told, is made all the more necessary by the Central Board's decision to make AC the only current available in the UK. This means that domestic and commercial apparatus suitable for use on DC is now difficult to get and shortly will be unobtainable. In spite of the lack of apparatus, the DC load in the island continues to grow, we are told, due to the installation of heating and cooking equipment, and any delay in planning our requirements at least 2 years ahead would be disastrous. Well, that was 1947. We skip forward to 1950 and a quirky story about Tynwald by candlelight following a fault at the Pulrose power station. The Isle of Man Times, Saturday, December the 2nd of 1950. 3:45 on Friday evening saw half of Douglas in darkness for about an hour, including the Tynwald chamber, where members were discussing the suggested increase in advocates' fees. First of all, 2 candles were produced by the messenger, and these generously were given to light the pencils of the 2 members of the press. Later, about a dozen candles dimly illuminated the chamber. Fortunately, Mr. Bolton, who was speaking at the time, had a box of matches with him, and so when he wanted to look up part of the report, he found the place with a match. Ultimately, the governor suspended the debate until the lights were restored, the court dealing with appointments to boards in the meantime. The police court also transacted business by candlelight. We're told the fault was due to a lack of synchronisation at the Pulrose power station, where a generator was a little late coming into operation. It rarely happens, and had the town supply been all AC, there would have been no interruption. As it was, only DC areas were affected, as DC substations needed a constant supply, and after they'd stopped, they had to be restarted individually. You forget a little bit about that, don't you? The Isle of Man Examiner, Friday, March the 14th, 1952, were told the Pulrose power station extension will cost up to £65,000. Douglas Corporation is to make application to Tynwald for leave to borrow £65,000, being estimated excess expenditure over the original sanction of £400,000 for extensions at the Pulrose power station. So even in the 1950s, things were running well over budget, it seems. Loan sanction for buildings was £102,900 and total expenditure will be £136,273. For plant sanction, it was £297,130 and total cost £328,358. On the changeover from DC to AC, unexpected sanctions totalled £58,292. And on completion of the changeover, it's been decided that the changeover from single-phase AC area to three-phase be only undertaken where really necessary. In 1953, the Isle of Man Times of Saturday, August the 8th, runs a story saying soot plague at Pulrose, power station chimney, a nuisance, and a cartoon of the famous tall and thin chimneys which I actually looked out over as a lad living in Ballacameen, down at Pulrose. A cartoon there by Dusty, where there's a lot of Dusty, some walkers and two children completely covered in soot walking with a stick. Belching Bertha, were told, the 250-foot chimney at Pulrose Power Station has been at it again. On Sunday, another soot plague, one of the many which have been bothering Pulrose ever since the chimney was built, covered the village with its murky pall. Washing was ruined, soot streaked the pavement along Groves Road and the Burnham Road. It gathered on windowsills and fence tops, and many people who'd turned out for an afternoon stroll had to turn back to change. On the links, golfers watched their opponents change to minstrels with shirts to match. And I didn't use the word before minstrels there, which was still in usage, it seemed, in the papers of 1953. It begins with an N, I think you might know. It was one of the worst plagues since a year last May, when residents in the lower section of Pulrose awoke to find houses, roads and pavements mantled in a thick blanket of black. It was so thick on the roads, walkers left their footprints in it. It was not so bad on Sunday, but it was bad enough to cause tenants to close all the windows in spite of the heat to prevent the soot being blown into their houses. Pulrose suffers when the wind is in the east or when there is very little wind, but when the wind is in the west, soot is often carried as far away as Ballabruey. I take a very serious view of the matter, stated Mr. C. Anderson, the borough electrical engineer. A grit arrestor was installed at considerable expense to stop soot being blown about, and the idea of a tall chimney is to get the smoke as widely dispersed as possible. We have told the manufacturers that we are far from satisfied, said Mr. Anderson, and modifications are still being carried out. Mr. Percy M. Shimon, the town clerk, stated we will not be taking the plant over from the manufacturers until this nuisance has been abated. Quite right too. If we turn to the paper of the Mona's Herald, Tuesday, August the 16th, 1960, noise at Pulrose Power Station. This is rather similar to the story that's recently been in the news. It'll be reduced to a minimum, we're assured. Everything possible is being done to stop noise from the diesel generators at the Pulrose Power Station. That undertaking was given by Alderman R.F. Quayle, chairman of the Douglas Corporation Electricity Committee, when he told members of the town council at their monthly meeting, "We're doing everything in our power to get the plant as silent as possible." Still isn't, I don't think, but there we are. The council approved a recommendation from the Electricity Committee for the installation of a third 2,200 kilowatt diesel generator at the power station at an estimated cost of £76,500. The question of undue noise was raised by Councillor L.W. Aston, who said that residents in the neighbourhood were disturbed by the pulsating beat of the two recently installed diesel generators, especially in the early hours of the morning. And this being 1960, this was the beat which I grew up with coming across from Pulrose. Moving the reference back of the recommendation, Councillor Aston asked the committee to consider the installation of a high-pressure steam plant and said he was not at all happy about the changeover from steam to diesel. They should plan for 20 years ahead, not just 2 or 3. Alderman Quayle replied that the Electricity Committee had considered this matter most carefully. They had gone fully into the question of using steam, diesel or gas turbines and had reached the conclusion that diesel generators were best suited for their requirements. He added that all possible steps would be taken to minimise noise. The resolution for the reference back, which was seconded by Councillor C.E. Burke, was lost without a division and the recommendation approved. And finally, an interesting piece from the Isle of Man Examiner of Thursday, November the 17th, 1960. Tynwald on Tuesday approved the petition of Douglas Town Council for leave to borrow a sum of $76,500, repayable within a period of 20 years, to defray the cost of the purchase and installation of a new diesel generator at the Pulrose electricity station, together with ancillary works. Mr. T.H. Colburn said that while diesel generating was cheaper, it had its disadvantages due to the fact the plant required very exact and regular maintenance. There was an anxiety among the engineers about diesel generators in this respect, and he asked for an assurance that proper maintenance would be carried out. Another objection to the diesel generators was because of the noise they made. The noise from the existing generator at the Pulrose power station carried over to the residential districts on the higher ground in the neighbourhood, I think that was us, and kept many people awake at night. Mr Colburn also urged that it was time that the island's two electricity undertakings got together. And he suggested the time was opportune for the island to be thinking of generating by nuclear energy, for which he said the island is ideal. This is 1960, I would remind you, so a mere 64 years ago. Mr H.C. Carouche opposed the petition on the grounds that the Pulrose power station was a blot on the landscape and should be moved to another site where it would not be offensive and a nuisance to the eye and other human senses. He said that the sooner there was one electricity authority for the whole Isle of Man, the better it would be for consumers. Electricity, water, the fire services, the lot. They should all be brought together, he declared. Mr T.A. Corkish, new chairman of Douglas Corporation Electricity Committee, said the question of using nuclear power for generating electricity had been gone into in 1960, and the corporation had been advised by their engineer that the time was not yet opportune to introduce it. But he added, before we go any further, we will investigate it. Mr W.B. Caneen, also a member of Douglas Town Council, said resiting of the Pulrose power station would only result in increasing the price of electricity. Regarding nuclear power, he said he was satisfied it would be another 10 years before the demand for electricity would justify it. That would bring us up to November 1970. Mr E.W. Farger, counsel for Douglas Corporation, said that the site of the Pulrose power station was not of the corporation's choosing. It was decided by Tynwald and forced on the corporation. Who'd have thought they were thinking nuclear power 60 years ago, 64 years ago to be exact. And it still crops up from time to time now, does it not? As I say every week on this programme, it's all old news. Until next week, cheerio. You're gonna be yesterday's news.